The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
A very good evening to you all, and welcome to another Wellbeing series on our SyntroP Wellbeing webinar. It's a new week, and it's really good to have you along with us. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. It's nice to have you here. And just so that you know, throughout our session tonight, please feel free to comment or to if you have any questions, to put them in the chat box, and we would love to attend to them. So one of my favorite human beings, who is the Dalai Lama, said, when you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But when you listen, you may learn something new. Listening and talking are equally important if we are to have meaningful communications and relationships in our lives. The problem is that we were never really taught or given the tools of how to listen effectively. We also find that sometimes there's a fine line between reacting and responding, a line that we're not too familiar with, especially now in this particular time, this modern day time where we are disconnected, we are disengaged and locked down in a pandemic where emotions are heightened and patience often scarce. So with that said, I would like to welcome Cindy Square, whose background lies in industrial psychology, teaching, learning, and coaching. And in case you don't know this, she is incredibly humorous and naughty as well. So don't let that serious face fool you at any point tonight. She's got this really, really naughty streak that I completely adore. She has an endearing and caring manner, and her passion for building meaningful relationships is quite evident. Tonight, Cindy's going to share with us the skills of communications so that we feel heard and, most importantly, understood. Hello, Cindy.
Zoraida, thank you. Hello, everybody. And it's really an honor to be here tonight and just chat to you, Zoraida. Thank you for just giving context to what it is that we're going to be talking about tonight. I need to just say to you that humorous, yes. Naughty, yes. I can't deny any of the above. I'll own it. Definitely own it. Zoraida, so I am going to try and share my screen. I have to just put a little caveat here. In that this system is brilliant, but my technological brain maybe not so much. So let us just see how this works for us. Let's go. Zoraida, can I just ask you, if you're still not on mute, can you see my PowerPoint?
I can, yes, Cindy, I can see it.
Brilliant. Okay. So I think just as an introduction, my name is Cindy Square, and I think one of the best things for me when I introduce myself is that many people think I'm the owner of Circle and Square. But today the joke is on me, because most of you, or those people who have been on the webinars, have met Barry, and you know who the master behind this company is. But what I can tell you about myself is that I am definitely the free child of Circle and Square, and that will make a little bit more sense a little bit later in this talk. I'm also a daughter. I'm the sister to my best friend. I don't know how many people are that lucky that they can call their sister their best friend. I'm a wife to my soulmate. I'm a mother of 2 wonderful boys, and I'm a daughter to a mother that feels like a friend. But through all of these interactions, I can tell you one thing, is that relationships, number one, doesn't come easy. And one thing that is true about every single human being is that we are all given to this thing called sensitivity. Now, when we talk about sensitivity, really what we are talking about is we are talking about the awareness of our own emotions, but we're also very aware of how other people around us feel. This sensitivity sits on a spectrum, and on the one side of the spectrum, you have got the insensitive people. Now, when I talk about insensitive, and you can just think in your own mind, literally, if you talk about emotions, it looks like the shutters, the blinds close down. And you can literally see this person's eyes gazing over, and they have no idea what it is that you are talking about. So just for example, today we will refer to them as the emotionally blind. I can tell you that I am married to one of those, so there are many stories. But on the other side of the spectrum, you get the hypersensitive, and hypersensitivity really says that where the blind, emotionally blind, sees too little, your hypersensitive sees way too much. Even if there is nothing to see, they will go and find meaning behind the words that you are speaking. They develop the superpower that we'd like to call X-ray vision. So you are talking, and they really are looking and seeing things that you definitely did not even think about. I'll give you an example. For many of us now in COVID, going out to the mall, and especially when we were still level 5, maybe level 4 a little bit, I can't actually even remember what level we're in. But, you know, you go out to the mall and you dress up, because this is the only time that you don't have to have your PJs on or your tights. And you've got a chance to actually see if you fit into your jeans, and you go out into the mall. And this one particular day, I was quite excited because I saw one of my friends in the distance, and I said to her, "Oh my goodness, you know, I nearly didn't recognize you." And she said, "What do you mean I got fat?" And really, this is the essence of X-ray vision. They will go and look for meaning, even if that meaning is not true and intended in what you were saying. To just play it out, the emotionally blind and the X-ray vision walks around maybe in the same mall that I was in, and they meet each other. And to try and explain the interaction that happens between emotionally blind and the X-ray vision, I'd like to share a story with you. So I need to tell you that I am Afrikaans. You can probably hear in my accent. So I am going to use the names Sarel and Sunette for the 2 characters that I am going to explain. Please, if somebody's name is Sarel or we've got a Sunette on the call, I promise I didn't go into the registrations and decided that I'm going to pick on you tonight. Sarel and Sunette, I like the alliteration, and that is why we went with those names. So Sarel, really, the whole story was built on an engagement that we had at an organization. And Sarel was a guy that we met on the first day that we went into this organization and we did our work. And Sarel really was somebody with energy. Whether you saw Sarel on a Monday morning or you saw Sarel on a Friday afternoon before it is 5 o'clock, 5 minutes before he went home, Sarel always had the most amazing energy. And I say to Sorrel, why is it that you have such amazing energy, even when everybody feel they can't even think about doing another stitch of work? You still are the go-to guy for everybody at the organization. And Sorrel said, you know what? I pride myself in getting enough sleep. He says, but you know what? I have to just tell you a story. So this particular day that I met him was a Monday morning. And he said, can I just tell you, it was Sunday night, and we have got a routine in our house. We do not stray from that routine because my wife and I know that if we get enough rest, that we are going to be able to give our best that next day at the office. So that night, we watched Carte Blanche, depressing as that may be, and straight after Carte Blanche, we decided to go to bed. But it was probably 20 minutes into their sleep, and Sorrel got an elbow in his ribs. And he says, yes, darling, what is wrong? And Sunette said, you know, Sorrel, I am so cold. Now, the brilliant husband and the go-to guy, Sorrel, gets up and he goes and makes his wife the most amazing cup of hot chocolate. Now, you need to understand, this man doesn't boil the kettle alone. He also warms the milk. He takes the cup of hot chocolate up to Sunette. He waits for her to finish drinking this cup of hot chocolate, and then waits for her to fall asleep before he goes to bed. Half an hour later, Sorrel gets another elbow in the ribs. Yes, darling. Oh, Sorrel, I am so cold. So what does Sorrel do? He gets up, he goes and gets his wife his favorite blankie. And he goes and he tucks her in and he makes sure that she is nice and warm, thinking that finally we can both go to sleep. But you better believe it, the third elbow came at 12 o'clock at night. Now, at this stage, Sorrel is ready to explode. And his wife, Sunette, says to him, you know what, Sorrel, please, before you get really angry, can I tell you a story? And at that moment, Sorrel goes like, are you actually joking? Are you kidding? 12 o'clock at night, this woman wants to tell me a story. She says, you know, when I was a little girl, I used to tell my mom that I was really cold. And what she would do is she would just hold me. At this point, Sorrel explodes. He says, you know what? The first time you told me you were cold, I had no problem going and making you a cup of hot chocolate. And can I just tell you, I heated the milk, I boiled the kettle, plus I waited for you to drink that amazing cup of hot chocolate before you fell asleep. The second time you woke me up, I went to the linen cupboard. I got you my favorite blankie. Plus, I tucked you in and waited for you to fall asleep. Now, if you think that I am honestly going to drive 200 kilometers to go and fetch your mother to come and hold you, you have got another thing coming. Now, really, in a classroom, I would have heard you laugh, but now I'm laughing at myself into a black hole. It's like playing tennis into a black hole. There's nothing coming back at me. But really, the essence of this is that as funny as this story may seem, it represents two very, very important points. Number one, when we look at Sorrel, we can see that he is struggling to listen deeply and connectedly. You see, 3 times Sunette tried to tell him what it was that she wanted. The third time, she nearly got there. She nearly got to the point where she could ask Sorrel what she wanted. But Sorrel was completely blind to what it was that Sunette was asking. But now you're probably sitting there on the other side of this GoToWebinar and you're saying, Cindy, but seriously, what is wrong with this woman? Like, why can she not just express her needs in a mature way? And honestly, this is what is going on in our society. We are all finding it very difficult to express our emotions in a mature way and to listen deeply and connectedly. In essence, what we are finding is that there is a huge gap. Now, this gap exists between what it is that people are saying to us and what it is that we are hearing people saying to us. But then we also need to be cognizant of the fact that there are also people in the world that are not expressing themselves. And that gap exists between what people are not telling us. Now, here we are. We are riding this corona coaster. And what makes this gap even bigger is the technology that we now need to navigate. Here I am building meaningful relationships with 108 attendees who I have never seen, never met, and I probably don't know your names. Maybe some of them, because I know my mom is here. Hello, Mom. But I cannot build that relationship. I don't know what it is, what you are saying. Hence, you are the only one that is listening to what it is I'm saying. So there is a huge gap that exists in our interactions at the moment. If we want to listen deeply and connectedly, if we want to talk so people listen, and we want to listen so that people talk, we need to understand first how it is that we show up in our interactions. And the only way that I can explain this to you is I want to show you the gap that exists in connection. Now, I need to ask you to please excuse me because I am going to use some personal examples here. I will first make it relevant to the story that we have just heard. In any interaction, there are 3 circles. The first circle, or the top circle, is represented by the task. What is the intention of the interaction? And we will call it the task. What do we want to get out of it at the end of the interaction? We have got the talker and we have got the listener. Now, if we use the example of Sarel and Sunette, Sunette being the talker, Sarel being the listener, and the task being what it was, the intention of what Sunette was trying to tell her husband, Sarel. So Sunette says to Sarel, you know, my mom used to hold me when I was cold. But what Sarel hears is that I have already performed the task. I have already made you a cup of hot chocolate. I have already given you a blanket. But where is the gap? The gap is between the listener and the talker. Because what the talker is actually saying, very loud and clear, is please, can you hold me? So let me give you an example of another interaction that I witnessed. What we do at Circle and Square, we go into organizations and we try and transform the organization, shift their mindset to a more relational, client-centric focus, and not to just be so task-focused. And this particular day, we have gone through the training. We have taught all of these people about connection. And now that day, I am there to go and observe. A woman walks in and she walks to the bank teller. This was particularly in a bank. And she says to the bank teller, oh, I'm so excited. I just got married and this is the first time that I'm using my married surname. And the teller says to her, can I have your green barcoded ID? She says, you know, with pleasure, you know, this is the last time or the first time that I'm using this green barcoded ID with my new surname in. And the teller says, I need to ask you a few questions just to authenticate that you are who you are. Now, can you see the gap? There is a huge gap between what the talker is saying, what the talker wants you to hear, and what the listener is really focused on. In the story of Sarel and Sunette, Sarel is focusing on the task. In his world, hot chocolate makes him warm. In his world, a blanket makes him warm. In that bank teller's world, authentication and documenting is the most important part, and the customer is being ignored in favor of the task. But let's make this a little bit more personal. My sister moved house, and as I walked into the house, I couldn't help her move that day. And as I walked into her house, I said to her, "Oh my goodness, look at you. You're so amazing. You've unpacked all of your boxes. You've literally got one box left." And she said to me, "You know what? I'm so exhausted. Please, can you just pass me that box?" And I said to her, "Of course, don't worry. Pour us wine. I'll even unpack that box for you." But when I drove home, I realized that if I had to score myself in terms of task service, I probably would have scored myself 100%. But in terms of customer-centric hearing, not. Because what is it that she said? She said, "I am so exhausted. Please, can you pass me that box?" Now, I think the question that I want you to reflect on is how many conversations and how many interactions have you been in lately where we focus on getting things done rather than on what it is that people are saying? You see, the truth of the matter is that everybody that we are engaging with comes to us with two hands. They come to us with a working hand, and they come to us with a greeting hand. Now, the working hand is the task. Now, can I tell you why it's so easy to go to the task? The task is documented. The task I can gauge according to, is it right, is it wrong? When we take up the greeting hand, it's a little bit more difficult because there's no process that is going to guide you in responding to "I'm exhausted." That requires the innate ability to listen and connect to that person and stepping out of your world in terms of what you think that person needs. In our society today, what we do is we often ignore that greeting hand in favor of the working hand. And the truth of the matter is that we cannot build meaningful relationships if we only focus on the working hand. Now, you're probably sitting there and thinking, okay, like I have to shift my mindset and how I listen. And what do I listen for is that greeting hand. But what does that mean? And I'm going to make it simple for you. I'm going to give you a formula for connection. Now, when we talk about the formula of connection, we would talk about C over T equals R. And I'm hoping that you are confused because this is generally how I feel in business meetings when people talk about a lot of jargon that I have no idea what they're talking about. But in essence, what we are talking about is connection over task is going to give you that relationship that it is that you are looking for. I've been in many sessions now during this lockdown, and most of them has been either on Teams or Zoom and now on GoToWebinar. And connection becomes very, very hard. And I'll tell you why. We are having conversations, but how many of those conversations actually focus on connection? One of the sessions that we are running, a lot of team members say, we had this brilliant session and the whole team came together and, we connect quite often. And there's one thing that I realized is that there is a difference between recognizing where somebody is at, and connection requires the recognition, but also responding to where that person is at. So if I say to you, I'm so exhausted, can we talk about that Excel spreadsheet? It's much easier to go to that Excel spreadsheet and completely ignore the connection. And I think particularly of my son, who has had to navigate online learning. And he'd say to me, "Mom, I'm really, really stressed. I'm stressed about this Teams." And what do I say? "Boy, just open Teams. Let's see what they asked us to do, and let's just get it done." Because the task is easy. But what about the "Mom, I'm so stressed" part? Now, my question to you also is, if you think of yourself, if we're talking about recognizing and responding, how many of you have got your own personal relationship intact? How many of you are recognizing how you feel and responding appropriately so that you can get to the task? You know, here's the problem, is that on these virtual platforms that we are on, it takes almost double the effort to try and connect with people properly. Number one, you cannot process people's nonverbal cues. I cannot see any person on this GoToWebinar. So the only thing that I'm able to draw from is my own energy. Okay. Secondly, is there is nothing coming back at me, and this is the thing that's happening on these platforms, is everybody's on mute. Only when you're required to talk. So you may be laughing like anything in the background, but the person that is presenting doesn't know what's going on. So sometimes, because that connection is not there, the task becomes that much more difficult. Now, I'm not saying that we need to only connect, because if we only connect, that means that we are actually just opening a therapy room, and that's going to help no one to get to the task. But if we only go to the task, it literally is like having a one-night stand with the people that you are interacting with. Because all you want to do is you want to get the task done, you want to press end on that Zoom call or Teams call or GoToWebinar, and you want to go on with your business, not even thinking about the person that you just engaged with. So it's vitally, vitally important for us to remember that if you want to have meaningful, efficient, effective relationships, it is dependent on equal amounts of connection over task. So, Rada, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask you, before we go into the language of connection, are there any questions? Are there any comments? Are there anybody who would like to engage in the connection over task and meaningful relationships that we have just spoken about?
Thank you, Cindy. I do have a couple of questions, and a question of my own as well. That was incredibly insightful, and thank you for drawing on your own personal experience and bringing your family members into it. I'm wondering, so looking at Sunette and Sarel, okay, what is your take on love language? Because there's a part of me that would go, okay, that's his love language, and maybe, you know, she's meant to understand his love language. And then there's the other, you know, feminist side to me that goes, well, if you want something, ask for it. If you want to be held, say, I need you to hold me more. You know, what's your take on that?
So I must be honest. You know, I've read the love language books, and I've even bought it for my husband. But, you know, what's very, very hard is you can't change what lies at the core of your being and how psychologically you are made up. And I'll give you an example. I'm upstairs. So I've got the work, I've got the kids, I've got my own home. And I will be upstairs and I will be shouting my head off. And I go downstairs and I say to my husband, you know what, like, I'm upstairs shouting. What is it? What do you hear? And he'll tell me, all I hear is that you're handling it. So our love language, both of ours are exactly the same, words of affirmation and physical touch. But in that instance, that didn't help us at all. So really, that's such an amazing question, because when we now go into the next section and we go into the language of connection and how psychologically we are made up, it makes a lot of sense why I would think, like Sunette, my husband hears that I need help, but yet he thinks by hearing me shouting and screaming that actually I'm handling whatever's going on.
Okay. Well, thank you. One of the questions that we have is, how do I raise awareness of my connecting hand or statement when someone is blind to the fact that I'm trying to bring connection into the task? And then I want to ask you another question as well, because I'm finding this fascinating. How do you draw the line between that connecting hand, and you speak of you can't only be there because then it will turn into a therapy session. So how do you draw the line between the connecting hand, or let's make it circle and square, which, you know, for those of us that joined us with Barry, I would take it that the connecting hand is the circle. How do we draw the balance between the circle and the square so that you are connecting, but you're not at the risk of it becoming a therapy session and business still happens?
So you know what? It really requires consciousness. And like I said, it requires that shift in mindset. And so to answer the first question is, if we now go into the language of connection, it will make a little bit more sense. But if the other party is not aware of the different ego states and the other party is not aware of the greeting hand, then we need to step into a position of assertiveness where we express our needs in a mature way. You see, the problem is if we're expecting something but we don't verbalize it and it doesn't happen, we can only hold ourselves accountable. But because you know what it is that you know, that the mind shift change, you can start listening to those points of connection. And Zoraida, here's the truth of the matter, is people do not say things without wanting to be heard. And if you want to get to the task, you must make sure that you take up that greeting hand, because it's going to take you so much longer to get to the task if you don't hear the point of connection. So to your second question is really, when we talk about connection over task, our intention here is to get the task done. But with the psychological insights and skills, we know that we can't get to the task if the person that we are engaging with is not ready to hear what it is that you want from them. So the only thing that's going to happen is you are going to frustrate yourself. And picking up points of connection doesn't mean that I have to have a long discussion about why are you exhausted, what can I do for you. Then it becomes a therapy room. But by merely saying, you know what, I hear you. I hear that you are saying you are exhausted. Would you like to talk about it? You know, sometimes people just want to be heard. Not all of us now need to step into a position to become therapists. People have got a need to talk, and people have got a need to be heard. And once we've heard them, they are capable of getting themselves into the task. And in the process, you have built a meaningful relationship.
Thank you, Cindy. You know, one of my favorite greetings is the greeting Sawubona, which means I see you. And I think, you know, innately at ground level, rooted level, all we really want as human beings is to be witnessed. And from what I hear, you're saying is, if someone responds to you, try and find the emotion first in what they're saying, and then secondary go on to the Excel sheet or the box, but acknowledge the fact that I'm cold or I'm exhausted first. So you acknowledge the emotion and then go on to the square, so to speak. I look forward to the next presentation.
Absolutely. You know, in the circle and square language, we would always talk about, if you understand the heart, you can connect to the head. And I think really this is what this formula is saying.
Thank you, Cindy. I look forward to this next section.
Okay, good. So no further ado, let's then go into, let's understand our gaps and let's understand where our own gaps lie. And we talk about the language of connection, but really what this is the theory of a psychologist by the name of Eric Berne, and he called this theory transactional analysis. And really what Eric Berne said is, if you had to take an X-ray of the human psyche, you will find that within all of us, there are three parts. You have got a parent part, you have got an adult part, and you have got a child part. And all of these ego states operate within us at any given point in time. What I want to just say, starting out with this, is please don't look at these ego states and say, oh, this is bad and this is good. we have to acknowledge the fact that we have got all of these ego states within us. Some of them may be more dominant than others. Some of them we can access easier. Others we need to work on accessing. If we look at the parent ego state, we can divide the parent ego state into the nurturing parent and the critical parent. Then we've got the adult. You can just hear by the adult, it's very serious. We don't divide the adult into anything. And then you've got the child. And the child can be divided into the free child, the adaptive child, and the rebellious child. So what I want us to do is just to dig a little bit deeper into each of these ego states so that you can get an understanding of what lies at the core of how you react and respond in your interactions. So the first ego state I want to share with you is the parent ego state, and we need to understand this. Am I still sharing? Yes, okay. So the first ego state is the nurturing parent, and really when we talk about these ego states, it is the part of us that reacts in a way. The nurturing parent is that part of us that loves. The nurturing parent is that part of us that cares for. The nurturing parent is that part of us that supports, that nurtures, and that looks after people. On the other end of the parent ego state, we have got the critical parent. Now, when we look at the critical parent, this is the part of us that wants people to improve. This is the part of us that pushes people to get better, that criticizes, that judges. Now, the critical parent part in us expects results, very straightforward, will offer perspective. So if you ask the critical parent, how does my hair look? I can tell you now that the critical parent will be very honest. If you ask a critical parent, how do I look in terms of what you're wearing? You need to expect a straightforward answer. The critical parent offers perspective, is firm. The critical parent can often be impatient. This is the disciplinarian of the two parts of the parent and finds fault. So has a lens in which they are looking for problems in something. Now, we need to understand that with the critical parent, if we have to look at examples, if you look at the nurturing parent, and we look at a hospital situation, let's take COVID, the nurse is going to be the nurturing parent, the one taking care of you, the one supporting you to get better. The critical parent in the doctor is the one that is giving you the strict guidelines in terms of what it is that you need to do to get better. Now, a show that I love, and I know that Romy, one of my colleagues, often laugh at me about this, but, you know, I love watching that 600-pound life, because if you want to see the critical parent, then the doctor on that show is an absolute representation of what the critical parent is. You know, you can try and put on puppy eyes. You can try and tell him, but I did eat right. He is the critical parent in the sense that he will tell you, you know what, if you ate right, you would have lost weight. And if you are not going to look after your well-being, you will die. Where the nurturing parent would say, you know what else can I do to support you so that we can see if there are different results for you when you come and visit again. What we need to understand about the parent ego state is the reason we've got this ego state is this is our guiding ego state. Depending on whether you are more nurturing or more critical will show you how you would guide in your interactions. The nurturing parent will guide you through care and support, whereas the critical parent will guide you through discipline and criticism. So again, I'm going to give you one of my own personal examples. At school, I came home with a report card, and you know, you need to read your parents' ego states as well, because ego states also apply to timing. And if the time feels very critical, then maybe it's not the best time to give your mom that report card. So maybe a Monday is not such a great day. Maybe a Friday is a better day to land that report card. But I would go and I would give my report card to my mom, and my mom would say, oh, 4Fs, shame, my darling. It was a tough term. Let's just see what we can do. How can I support you? I think really you need to just relax this holiday. Let's see how we can fix it. On the other hand, my dad looks at the report card. He looks at the 4Fs. He adds a 5th F, and he says your life is cancelled. No holiday. You will be working your whole holiday, and that is how it's going to be. So we need to understand that when we look at the parent's ego state, the parent's ego state is there for the guiding, whether it is through care and support or whether it is discipline or criticism. Let's have a look at the adult ego state. So if the parent ego state is within us, that helps us with our guiding, then the adult ego state is there for the thinking. Now, when we talk about the adult ego state, then words that we can use to describe the adult ego state is the adult is that part of us that is objective. The adult is that part of us that is rational and logical. The adult is facts and figures orientated. The adult is task focused. And most importantly, the adult part of us is completely unemotional. Now, just remember that because this is just a part of us, it doesn't mean that the person can't have emotions. It just means that if I operate in that interaction from the adult ego state, it comes from a very unemotional state. So I can tell you by far my husband's highest ego state is adult. So I will never go to him and say, how are you feeling? I will always go and I will say, what are you thinking? And I can even tell you that he used an Excel spreadsheet before he asked me to get married, because the facts and the figures had to align before he makes any serious decisions in his life. Let's have a look at examples of the adult ego state. So accountant, you can imagine in the time that we're going through now, where the adults of businesses, especially accountants, have to look at the financials of an organization, they have to make very hard decisions. If we think about Section 189 letters, if we think about retrenchment, the accountant is the one that's going to say, you know what, the numbers doesn't make sense. And you can't make that decision from an emotional space. If we look at an attorney or we look at a judge, again, when you present somebody in court, it is about the facts. It is about, what does the details say? I can't be emotional as an attorney and say, but I really like this person. And I really don't want this person to go to jail. So in these roles, it becomes very important to have a high adult ego state. The child ego state. The child is the ego state that feels. This is the ego state where emotion lives. And I can tell you that majority of people that have, from the beginning of this, I love Nikki's term, the Corona coaster, from the beginning of COVID to where we are now, we have all felt certain emotions. Barry spoke about the emotion of loss, that we feel that we have lost certain things. Maybe we are now in a position where we are angry because we still can't buy cigarettes and alcohol. Maybe we feel a little bit hopeless because we really have taken strain. Many people have been affected in many different ways. Barry also used the phrase where he said that we're all in the same storm, but we are in different boats. And what is the emotion that is living in that boat that you find yourself in? So let's have a look. The child ego state divided up into the free child, the adaptive child, and the rebellious child. Now, what does this mean if I have these ego states operating within me? I told you in the beginning when I introduced myself, I said to you that I am for sure the free child of this circle and square team. Now, the free child is that part of us that's creative, that is spontaneous, that is energetic. If the free child walks into a room, the party has started. There's energy, that the lights goes on. Fun-loving, playful. Now, here's the thing with the free child, is the free child does not think about consequences because we are completely unable to delay gratification. This is how the thinking will go. Oh, I really need that pair of shoes, but you know what? I'm not getting paid. But you know what? I need it. I have to have it. And this is the free child. You'll buy it. Maybe when month end comes, you may consider the consequences. And this is where the adult completely, I think, goes into a spin. Let's have a look at the adaptive child. The adaptive child is that part of us that is accommodating. The adaptive child puts up with a lot, is very tolerant. We can actually say that the adaptive child are people pleasers. They will really put their own needs aside in order to help other people. Now, the reason the adaptive child part of us does this is because they've got a huge need for acceptance, love, and recognition. Now, the biggest part about the adaptive child is that this part of us says yes, even though everything inside of you screams no. Please, can you give me a lift home? Yes, of course. But inside, I have to go fetch my children. I have to cook supper. I haven't stopped at the shops. But my mouth says yes. My head and everything else inside screams no. Let's look at the rebellious child. The rebellious child is that part of us that goes against. The rebellious child speaks its mind. They say what the adaptive child cannot say. They say what the adaptive child's only thinking. The rebellious child is oppositional and defiant. The rebellious child loves the word no. They're not afraid of getting themselves into conflict, and they are definitely not afraid of confrontation. They do not care about the consequence. Where the free child doesn't think about the consequence, your rebellious child really does not care about the consequence. Now, I thought about a few examples of these free children. And if we think about the free child and you think of comedians and you think of the energy that comes with comedians, definitely that depicts the free child. The adaptive child, now here's the problem. You see, I can't put a photograph up, and even if I had to put a photograph up, I probably would have needed to put myself up because the adaptive child hides. You can't see them. If you've ever watched the movie Yes Man, where he decided that he's going to say yes to everything, really, that is the adaptive child. And who else to depict the rebellious child? You are so rebellious to what people are saying. People are saying that what you are doing is not healthy. And in your rebellion, you go and you write a song where you say, no, no, no. You do not get more rebellious than that. So this next part, I'm going to ask you to just dig a little bit into yourself, just to gain a little bit of insight of what you look like. Just to tell you why this is important, your ego state influences every single interaction and transaction and the result that will follow. Many times we will walk away from an interaction and we will say, my goodness, not even thinking that actually it was us who created that interaction. In essence, your ego state determines whether you talk so that people listen, or if you listen so that people talk. We need to understand ourselves before we can understand and engage others. What I'm showing you on the screen now is what we call an egogram. Now, how we engage with the egogram is, it's not for the adult people. It's not technical at all. It doesn't have to add up to 100. There's no math sums involved in this. All you have to do is you look at this and you say to yourself, if I have to look on a scale of 0 to 100%, what would I say? How much of the critical parent do I feel I have inside of me? And I do the same for the nurturing parent. And what we can do is we can use the definitions that I've given you. The critical parent judges pushes people to improve is very strict, expect results. Nurturing parent, caring, kind, supports, encourages. Adult, facts and figures orientated, rational, logical, unemotional. Free child, creative, energetic, spontaneous, doesn't think about consequences. Adaptive child, tolerant, puts up with a lot, says yes when they mean no. Rebellious child, oppositional, defiant. Okay, so you get the point of this. What I'm going to do again is I'm going to make myself very, very vulnerable, and I'm going to put my own ego state up. Generally, what we do is ask people in your life to give you words that define you. Now, just a few words that my colleagues and some of my family gave: kind, funny, no filters, caring, hardworking, always says yes. Now, this should give you an indication of what my egogram would look like. So let's go. The first thing we need to know is that your critical parent and your nurturing parent work as a pair. And the most important part of this is what we are looking for is balance, okay? Now, the balance that we are looking for is that, is there a gap that is larger than 20%? Because what that is saying is that I can access, if you look at mine, I can access my nurturing parent very easily. But when it comes to being straightforward, when it comes to guiding people and telling them where they're going wrong, I find it very, very hard. So to give people that structure, to give people that perspective is not that easy for me. Your second pair is the adult and the free child. Now, this is how you would approach work. I think this is probably, lockdown has been the best thing for my productivity, because the free child in me would always engage in a conversation before I start the task. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't engage the adult. My adult is just as high, which means that work has to be done today. But because my free child is the higher of the two, I will generally jump into the energy, the creativity, the small talk, and then into the task of the adult. The adaptive child and the rebellious child, as you can see, do I speak my mind? Does my voice get heard? No, it doesn't. I am the one who says yes to everything. I am not generally straightforward in telling people no, or saying, going against, or saying when something is wrong. So am I the change starter? Definitely not. Now, here's the thing that you need to understand with the adaptive child. Because their voices aren't heard, what happens is, because the mouth says yes, the head screams no, there is that underlying current of resentment, that you've got against other people. The point is, I have said yes, but I am still going to go and stand at the water cooler and say, can you believe that somebody has just asked me to do this? And I can tell you that resentment, that emotion is tiring. And it really is not, it doesn't serve you. So you can see in this that my balance is out. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because you need to understand that every single one of these ego states have got a purpose. And that's why I said to you in the beginning that you shouldn't look at it as positive and negative. You should look at the balance. You should be able to step into your critical parent when it is needed, and you should be able to step into your nurturing parent when it is needed. The same with the adult and the free child, and the same with the adaptive child. So let's just very quickly have a look at ego states and our well-being. When we look at the critical parent and the nurturing parent, a high critical parent If that gap is above 20%, that is what we mean with high. The positive is you are great at keeping people on track. You are great at providing structure, and hence there's containment for the adaptive child. I can tell you as an adaptive child, they do need the containment of the critical parent. Now, here is the risk that we run. The risk of the high critical parent is that if we are too strict and if we are too judgmental on ourselves as well as on others, we run the risk of alienating people away from us. They are not going to ask for our help. If we look at a high nurturing parent, we need to understand the positive. We care enough to listen. We show empathy and we show understanding. The negative side of a high nurturing parent is that sometimes we care too much about others and we run the risk of burnout. We run the risk of rescuing rather than supporting people, and we can unintentionally create a dependence on you. The adult and the free child, if you've got a very high adult, then you are amazing to have in a team because you are focused on getting the task done. You are results orientated. The negative part is when we talk about connection over task, you may miss that point of connection because your focus is on getting the task done. You can be blind to the emotions of others, and sometimes you need to just let go. You need to find your circle. I'll give you an example. The adult will say that they do have a circle, but I can promise you that when they plan their circle, it's got a to-do list, it's got a tick list, it's got an Excel spreadsheet. So they're saying they have fun, but yet it's very structured fun. And I can only criticize it because I'm the free child and my husband is the adult, and that's the only reason that I'm pointing that out. Okay, lastly, if we look at a high free child and a lower adult, a high free child survives stressful situations, and we survive it through the energy of the free child. But here is the problem, is that the free child needs connection. The free child's energy comes from the being with other people, drawing from other people's energy. Because without people, without that connection, that energy of the free child is not sustainable. If we look at the high adaptive child and the low rebellious child, the high adaptive child is wonderful to have as a family member, as a friend, as a colleague. This is the go-to person, always willing to listen, will follow instruction, and they are compliant. The problem with a high adaptive child is you can build unhealthy resentment and you don't know what they are really feeling. They can be taken advantage of and they run the risk of burnout without anyone knowing.
Hi guys, thank you. It looks like Cindy's battery may have run low. So here we are, testing times in COVID-19 as we navigate webinars as such. Thank you very much to Cindy for that presentation. We are drawing towards the end of our SyntroP Wellbeing series tonight. Some of the questions that came up were questions like, how do we remain connected during this time? And I'm hoping that from Cindy's presentation with the high adaptive child and the rebellious child and understanding our egograms, that we are able to navigate those spaces. For me personally, it was quite apparent that I find myself going through that egogram at different stages in my life. Oh, there you are, Cindy, you're back. Was that your battery that ran low? I think you're muted, Cindy. Cindy? Okay, for some reason, Cindy is not coming through. But as I was saying, just to wrap up, in terms of my own experience, I find that with my egogram, I go through different stages at different spaces in my life. So it all depends on what's happening for me at that moment in time. Is Cindy back? Do we have sound with Cindy? Cindy, I think you are on mute. Okay, Cindy's gone again. Sorry about that, guys. So yes, we don't be hard on yourself. Be sure to keep the connection. And it's also quite apparent with the personal stories that Cindy shared with her husband. You know, there are two different kinds of and types of human beings. But one thing that was apparent for me listening to her is this word respect. It seems that they have this great level of respect between one another. And it's so easy often to say, I don't get along with this person or that person because we're different. But in that difference, we have the ability to find harmony if we can learn from that. And that goes back to that quote that I initially mentioned about the Dalai Lama, is that we are able to learn from other people if we are able to listen effectively. I'm not too sure if Cindy has sound right now. Do you have sound, Cindy? Seem to have lost Cindy there. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on our SyntroP Wellbeing series. Continue to keep your friends and family in the loop, and you do this by simply sharing our registration link. You can find that link on our handles on social media. You can find us on Facebook as well as Instagram at SyntroP Wellbeing. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that you've enjoyed tonight. Apologies for the technical glitches, but this is 2020 and this is how it goes. From myself, Zoraida Jardine, and the rest of the SyntroP Wellbeing series, good night.